Good evening, welcome. If you do have a mobile phone, if you'd like to put it on silent, please, thank you. Right, a massive welcome back to Mark Devlin with free will, consciousness, consent and the corporate music industry. Popular music, played on multiple radio channels throughout the world 24/7, played in shops, in advertising for our entertainment maybe, or entrainment, maybe, maybe not. Mark Devlin, long-time DJ, with his intimate links to the music industry, awakened to the fact that the industry's involvement in a mind control programme going back many decades is making us spellbound. Possibly one of the many modes of corporate control aimed at humanity. Let's find out a bit more. Please welcome Mark Devlin.
Thanks, Rob. Evening, folks. Sorry about the technicals. I'm the least technically competent DJ that you'll meet. I'd still be playing vinyl if I had any choice in the matter. But we got over it. Some of you may have caught me here last year. I did my first talk at New Horizons in September last year, and I was talking all about the various manipulations of the mainstream music industry, mind-controlled artists, dark occult symbolism, and all the rest of it. And this talk is a significantly overhauled version of that. We get into the reasons why predictive programming is done and why these symbols are placed in plain sight for all of us to see. And in most cases, the symbols and these sort of plot lines that we see in predictive programming are not recognized by the conscious mind. We're not fully aware of what we're seeing. It gets absorbed directly into the subconscious mind, which is where symbolism lives. Symbolism is the language of the subconscious mind. And there's a great quote by the American researcher Jay Widener, who says, if a picture is worth 1,000 words, a symbol is worth 1,000 pictures. It all goes on at a subliminal level, and it's the subconscious mind that they're looking to target all the time in terms of influencing our thoughts and our emotions without us realizing it's going on. Why is predictive programming done then? There are three main reasons which are usually given as to why they do it. The first suggestion is that by placing a depiction of something that is yet to come, it helps to energetically empower that situation into physical manifestation by having large numbers of people directing their attention to it. So people are watching a movie or a TV show or a music video, they're seeing this stuff, they're giving their attention to it by way of their energy, albeit on a subconscious level. And the theory goes that this is helping to empower it into being, because everything happens on an energetic level in the unseen realm. That's one reason, that's one explanation for it. Second one is that by doing this, it allows the eventual desired outcome that they want to be more readily accepted by the public through a pre-existing familiarity with it. So, using the 9/11 example, if you place enough depictions of what's to come in all these movies and TV shows that many, many people will see and absorb, when the eventual event occurs and when it's presented to us officially via the mainstream news, there's a kind of familiarity that goes on at a subconscious level where you think to yourself, I've seen that before. You're not consciously processing the thought, but the recognition is there. And so when they tell you, this is what happened, Bin Laden did it, planes flew into the tower, they collapsed because of the fire and the concrete, the steel beams couldn't cope with it. When you absorb all that stuff, because you've had suggestions of it implanted into your mind, you're more likely to accept the official version of it. Okay, that's the second of the three main explanations. The third one comes back to natural law and free will consciousness, and the idea that there are karmic consequences dished out by the universe according to our thoughts, behaviours and actions. And the perpetrators of these events believe that they can escape the karmic consequence that would ordinarily come down on them by gaining our tacit approval for it. They're getting us to consent to what they want to do through our own free will. And even though we would have been tricked into giving that consent by deception, as far as they see it, we haven't said no. They, as far as they're concerned, have told us what they want to do. We've recognised it, whether consciously or not, and by going along with it and not objecting, we've given them the green light to go right ahead and do it as they see it. I think all three of those explanations as to why predictive programming is done have validity, and I think they all carry some weight. But I think the third one there, which is that it's all about tacit approval and our consent, our unspoken consent to these situations, is the key to understanding why they do it. I want to get more into consent and contracting as we go on. Might be a good point to take a break at this stage though and come back and do that in about 15 minutes. So we'll do that. Thanks.
Okay, part two, Mark, thank you.
Welcome back. I hope part one made sense. I wasn't entirely happy with how it flowed, and it didn't kind of come together in a way that I hoped it would, but if it did make sense, that's all good. As I said, it's a bit of a road test for this information. It's the first time that I've presented this stuff. I got quite comfortable with doing my previous talk because I was so familiar with the content, but these are all kind of new concepts that I'm trying to put across. So if they do make sense, then it's all good, and we'll try and clean up in part two. So we're talking all about consent and how they get us to agree to something without necessarily understanding the nature of it. As far as they're concerned, all they need is our consent, implied or otherwise. And it's known as, one expression of it is its revelation of the method, whereby you have to be told what they're going to do, then as they see it, it was your free will choice not to object. And this is taken to represent your implied consent. And of course, looking at it realistically, nobody could be expected to look at a Little Wayne video with 12 skeletons in a movie theatre and say to themselves, hang on a minute, I see what they're going to do here. In a few days, they're going to shoot up a movie theatre when the Batman movie is on and kill 12 people. I'm not having that. Or to look at a Michael Jackson record sleeve and say, I see from this that in 4 years they're going to try and blow up the World Trade Center Twin Towers. I'm not happy with that. I'm going to write to that nice man, President Bush, straight away and tell him I'm not up for that at all. Nobody could reasonably be expected to put that interpretation on these things. And yet, as far as they're concerned, because we didn't say no, that's the green light for them to go right ahead and do it. So we're talking about manipulated consent. And I've got some examples shortly of other ways in which they gain this in other areas of human life outside of the entertainment industry. And when I came to assimilate these thoughts in my mind and come to an understanding of how this stuff all works and why they're doing it, I wasn't sure straight off that I'd understood it correctly. And there was some room for doubt there. It was an interpretation that I put on it, and I was new to the subject, so, I wasn't quite sure. But I was very reassured when I got some synchronistic confirmation of the understandings that I'd come to from some other sources. And one of them was Mark Passio, who we go back to, and I only quote him so much because he just puts everything so well in a totally unambiguous way. And I heard him say on one of his What on Earth is Happening podcast radio shows that one of the dark principles of their ideological tenets is that if you tell people what you're doing, even if it's telling them wordlessly through symbols or numbers, then you've somehow gotten their implied consent because they haven't said no. And to not say no is to tacitly say yes in their mentality. And while we're talking about their mentality, it is worth bearing in mind that when it comes to the controlling elites, what we are talking about, of course, is sick, mentally ill psychopaths who are largely devoid of humanity. They're devoid of the principle of care that most humans have. They don't have compassion or empathy. And so we can kind of expect them to have a skewed and distorted and perverted interpretation of things. And I would suggest that is the nature of the interpretation that they put on the aspect of implied consent. Just going on further with some comments from Mark Passio. So that, in their mind, relieves the burden of karma that would ordinarily come down upon them for directing these actions. Because they don't actually take these actions, they get their order-following house slave dogs to do it for them. Doesn't mince his words. Great thing about him. In their mind, because they told you in a wordless, occult way, that in some way alleviates the karma because they did say it in some form. It's a sick, twisted way of looking at it. Exactly. And just going back to his comment about they don't actually take these actions and they get their slave dogs to do it for them. When you look at the concept of karma and karmic consequences for our actions, when you have a scenario such as a military pilot being instructed to drop a drone bomb on a village of civilians in Iraq or Afghanistan or whatever, that order would have come from a general or somebody high up in the military, and the pilot in question, being effectively a foot soldier, usually carries out that order without question because it's their job, that's an order, and that's all they need to know. But where is the karma going to get dished out in that situation? Is the bulk of the karmic consequence going to go to the order giver, the general who instructed this bomb to be dropped? Or is it going to go on the individual that carried out that action without assessing for themselves, through their own free will choice, whether it was a moral action or not, whether it was a right behaviour or a wrong behaviour? They went ahead and dropped that drone bomb. They killed a bunch of children. They are the ones that are going to reap the karmic consequences for that action, because their actions actually brought it into physical manifestation, not the general that gave the order from above. So that's the way karma works in a very real way, entirely based upon our thoughts, behaviours and actions and the free will choices that we make, because we're gifted with the ability to do that, and we are bound by the tenets of natural law, whether we like it or not, whether we believe it or not. Doesn't make a difference. It applies either way. Always has, always will. It's eternal, it's universal. More confirmation of this perspective on things from Fritz Springmeier, researcher, author, whose specialist area is trauma-based mind control. He's done a lot of work into how that all pans out. And he's paid the price for it as well, because he got fitted up with some bogus burglary charge, and he got put away for several years. And they do say that when you're copping the flak, you're over the target. And it seems that through some of his work with trauma-based mind control survivors and in exposing how that very dark, very ugly world all works, he kind of paid the price for it because he was getting a little too close to the truth. But he talks about other stuff as well. And I interviewed him for one of my Good Vibrations podcasts a couple of years ago. And what he said was there's a reference in Scripture where Satan has to come before God to ask permission to mess with Job's life. So people that were religious will often say that God insists that evil broadcasts what it's going to do. You don't have a free ticket to just go ahead and do evil, but you have to tell. It's called revelation of the method. Exactly. It's just another way of expressing the same idea. And more confirmation, which I was very happy about. Again, a synchronistic thing that just came across my radar. Thomas Sheridan, in an interview for Alchemy Radio last year, said, telling us is part of the magic. We have to consent. That's why they blow the whistle on what they do through all kinds of books and movies and so on. And they'll often show us a hint of things before they do them. And this is how their sorcery, their black hexen paganism works. You have to be told. And there's another school of thought that when they carry out these events and they present these symbolic references to it, it's a form of magic, it's a form of dark magic which is going on. And it has to be a two-way exchange of attention and energy. So they're putting this information out there, and we, as the general public that are absorbing it through whatever outlet it is, are giving our attention to it. We're taking that message, but we're also giving our energy and our attention back to it. So it's a two-way exchange of energy, and that is the method by which it's empowered into being. He expands on that comment with a great example. This is why Dracula always knocked on the door and asked to be let in. He has to be invited. They're telling you again. The devil has to be invited in. Then you forfeited your right to say, I was taken by surprise. No, you brought it in. This is why we all have to learn what they're doing to us. We have to learn wordplay. We have to learn neuro-linguistic programming, because the only thing that's keeping them in power is our acquiescence to their pathological drive. And the best weapon we have against them is our refusal. Exactly. Another example of evil having to be invited and not being able to empower itself unless there's an invitation to do so, unless there's a part played by us, the recipients. It came from the Exorcist movie, and anyone that's seen it might recall that the demonic entity that possesses the Reagan, Linda Blair character, only comes into her after she's been messing about with a Ouija board that she found in the basement. It's her opening up that portal to this demonic entity, whether she understands it or not, and clearly in the movie she didn't know what she was doing, but it doesn't matter whether the understanding is there. The fact is, the portal was opened up, and the demon was invited in this case by way of the contact that was made via the Ouija board. Don't know what that was supposed to be. Yeah, that was supposed to be a slide from the Wicker Man movie, also 1973, starring Edward Woodward and Christopher Lee. And anyone that's seen that movie might recall that at the very end, before this group of pagans are to make a human sacrifice of the Edward Woodward police officer character in this giant Wicker Man effigy, they state that a condition of this sacrifice being successful was that the subject had to come willingly themselves. And in the plot of the movie, he's trying to find this missing girl, and he's gone to this island off the coast of Scotland to conduct an investigation into what's happened to this missing girl. So he's gone there of his own free will, as they see it. And because he did that, he wasn't forced to go there. He went there through choice. That enables the sacrifice to be carried out according to their tenets. Again, it's consenting and making a free will choice. And going back to the Truman Show movie, there's a very telling quote in that as well. It's part of the plot line, where the Christoph character, who is the controller, the sort of handler of the Truman central character, says he could leave at any time if his was more than just a vague ambition. If he was absolutely determined to discover the truth, there's no way we could prevent him. And it's a reference to the Jim Carrey Truman character recognising the fact that he's living in this simulated reality and that nothing is real. And they're saying that he could have escaped this any time that he'd wanted if the will was there. They could not stop him if he made that free will choice. But because he didn't, then he remains a captive in it. I want to focus on a few examples that I've come up with of the way in which our consent and our tacit approval is manipulated, usually against our will. It always comes down to the same thing. The elite controllers recognise that they're bound by natural law, and they recognise that there's cause and effect and karmic consequence for our actions, theirs and ours. And just to recap, they feel that if they tell us about what they're doing in advance or in some kind of coded way, that's enough for them to escape the flak for doing so. And then the emphasis and the onus is on us, because we were told, did we choose to do anything about it or not? The choice was ours. There are many ways in which this plays out in our daily reality. Whenever some politician announces that there's going to be some overseas war, going into some foreign nation to invade it and drop bombs and plunder the resources, they never actually do it without telling you that they're going to do it. You get it on the evening news, you get it in the mainstream media. There's always some announcement and some pathetic justification as to why they're doing it, some infantile cover story. But as far as they see it, they've told you, over to you. What are you going to do about it? Well, what can we do? Nothing. So it goes ahead.
You've already consented to it if you're registered to vote.
Exactly, which is a point I was going to make later. By voting, you are consenting to the continuation of the situation we currently have. Institutionalised paedophilia. Well, we know all about it. Nobody can claim we don't know that we're governed by child rapists. It's in the mainstream media. It's out of the realms of the alternative. You can read about this stuff in the Daily Mail and see it on the BBC Evening News. We know it's going on. We know we've got these sexual deviants and perverts and, we're supposedly governed by them. And we've still got them because collectively, again, going back to that macrocosmic thing, I guess we just don't care enough as a human race or a nation or whatever to say we're not having this. This is quite clear. This is overt what they're doing, and yet it continues because we don't care enough to say we're not having it. Then when it gets to things like vaccines, I'm sure most of us here understand the serious health risks associated with vaccines and some of the medical conditions that they can lead to. Far from preventing them from taking root, they actually trigger them in many cases, as I'm sure many people understand. And they're full of all sorts of horrors, formaldehyde and mercury and aborted fetuses, monkey brain tissue, chick embryos. How can it ever be a good idea to put shite like that into a human body, and particularly the body of children with systems that haven't even developed properly yet? And yet, you can actually find out what is in a vaccine that you're proposing to take, if the will is there to do it. If you choose to do the research, you can find out. And often the reality of these things, monkey brain tissue and bloody fetuses and stuff, is disguised behind multi-syllabled chemical sounding names. But again, you can still find out what they actually are if you are vigilant enough to do the research. And so, if your doctor is trying to give your 2-year-old some vaccine or other, you have the ability to ask them what's in it before you take it. So again, the opportunity is there to object. Most people don't think to question it. Most people go right ahead and take it. They put that trust in authority. So there you go. There's the tacit approval. There it was. You didn't say no. Anything that happens now, it's on you. Sodium fluoride in the water and in toothpaste and in mouthwashes. It's not a good idea. It's not a good thing, as many will understand. It calcifies the pineal gland and all the rest of it. Very bad for human health. Aspartame, same way, destroys brain cells, makes you stupid. Not a good thing to put into your body. E-numbers, same way. And yet, you can always find out where they are. You might think that if these psychopaths are hell-bent on having a nation of dumbed-down morons because they've been taking aspartame and E-numbers and stuff, they might choose to conceal the fact that it's in children's squash and fizzy drinks and sweets and all this other stuff. They might choose to be deceptive about it. And yet, they always tell you, ingredients are always available. You pick up any toothpaste in the supermarket, it'll always tell you there's sodium fluoride in it. You pick up any bottle of cordial or squash from the supermarket, if aspartame is in there, it's going to tell you. Same with E-numbers. E, whatever it is, it's always listed in the ingredients. They've told you. If you go ahead and buy it anyway, if you drink it, your choice. Cigarettes is an obvious one. They've always listed the health risks, often with graphic pictures of what can happen to you if you smoke too much. They've told you, if you go ahead and do it, they're not responsible, as they see it. And a few other examples. CCTV in public buildings, and it's on buses now. You get on a bus and you'll often see a sign letting you know that you could well be getting filmed. They're even doing it in restaurants. There's certain restaurants where they're recording people's conversations. My wife's been into one in a Chinese restaurant where she discovered that they were recording punters' conversations at tables and naturally left straight away. But there was a sign up advising you that it's going on. So they'll always tell you when you're being filmed. So you've got the opportunity to say, I'm not having that, I'm out of here. But most people don't. They go right along with it. But they've told you. Speed cameras on roads, of course, there always have to be signs, or at least there's supposed to be. Even when they're using the mobile vans, there's supposed to be a sign up somewhere in the vicinity letting you know that you could get caught on one of these cameras. So if you are, once they've warned you, your fault, you pay the consequence. A credit card or a mobile phone contract, we've all seen them. They go on for pages in very small print with all manner of stuff that nobody ever reads because it's so bloody boring. Most people screw it up and put it in the bin. But they told you. That's why they put it there. That's their way out. And then police reading you your rights. They always have to do it. They go through the same script. And then if you get fitted up later in the day, at least you were warned in some way that it was going to happen. So these are all methods of manipulated consent. And it goes on all the time. And very much related to consent and consenting is contracting, which is where you agree to a certain situation. It's similar to consenting to it, but it's not always as underhand and as unspoken as consenting. And when it comes to contracting, I think the ultimate expression of it, when you go right back to kind of the root source of everything, is that when you speak to a lot of spiritual mediums and past life regressionists, they will often tell you that before we incarnate into this physical reality in human form, when we're back at source in spirit soul form, we actually enter into a contract with regard to the sort of life that we're going to live when we come into this existence. And they'll often tell you that you pick the people that you're going to have that experience with. So in spirit soul form, you can actually select the other spirit souls that you're going to interact with as your parents or your spouse or your children or your enemies, and you kind of incarnate together in groups and then live out those experiences that you have contracted to. Naturally, we don't remember doing this, and I can't say for certain whether there's any validity to that or not. Who possibly can? But I'm just pointing out the fact that there is a strong belief that we contract towards the life experiences that we have before we actually get here. There's a strong belief in that, and it's the same principle and concept of contracting at play there. Otherwise, contracting in full effect can be seen in a very tangible, real-world way in terms of the contract that we are entered into with the entity known as government when we're born. And it all comes down to your birth certificate. And this is getting into an area which, again, will be familiar to a lot of people. It's the sort of common law, law of the land, versus admiralty, maritime law, legal situation that we have in this country and so many others around the world. And we're tricked into contracting with the government by way of our birth certificate, which is generated and validated for us by our parents. And of course, they don't realise what they're doing because they're not told openly. Nevertheless, we are being tricked and deceived into a lifetime of slavery and subjugation to the government when we have a kind of corporate entity version of ourselves created for us in our name by way of our birth certificate. It's all down to underhand tactics and trickery and wordplay, and it ties into maritime law, admiralty law, being used over and above common law, the law of the land, which is very closely linked to natural law, which should be in place. But we've allowed a situation to take root where maritime law is used, and it comes with its own wordplay and double meanings. And you can see that in the very phrase birth certificate, where you take the word birth to have a double meaning, as well as birth in terms of being born. A berth is also what happens to a boat or a ship, a vessel, when it comes into a dock. And there's all kinds of other double meanings and wordplay when you get into this whole realm, such as dock itself. When you go into a court of law, in one of the courts governed by the Crown Corporation of the City of London, you enter into their legal realm and you stand up in a dock, and that is symbolic of a dock that a ship would go into in a harbour, because you, as the living flesh individual, are being viewed symbolically as a vessel that is being governed by corporate maritime law. This is a major deception which most people have no idea is going on, although there is awareness of it growing by the day, and there's much information available on it for anyone that wants to do the research. So this particular ingenious method of enslaving us and getting our consent and our contracting to something is becoming more apparent, but still too many people are getting caught for it. And this, to me, all demonstrates that the controllers that we have, sadly, are in full understanding of how reality works. And they genuinely believe in karmic consequence for violating natural law without our consent. And that's why they have to trick us into giving this consent by deception and by underhand tactics. And they know that we would never willingly concede to it if they were open about it. And if they said, okay, well, if you sign this birth certificate, you're going to be enslaved for the rest of your days, and you're going to have to work and pay taxes, and the taxes that you generate are going to be used as collateral to pay off the loans that we've taken from the private cartel of central bankers masquerading as the Federal Reserve and the Bank of England. Because we're beholden to these entities, we're using human collateral to pay off that debt. You're okay with that, aren't you? I think most people would probably reject that one. And so because they understand that, they have to dress it up and obfuscate it and just make it impossible for most people to understand. But the principle is still there. They understand that there are consequences for these actions under free will consciousness and natural law. And they, in their psychopathic, sick-ass ways, are trying to avoid that for themselves. They seem to think it gets them off the hook. I would suggest that they have a very big shock coming on the day that they leave their bodies and exit this reality and come to, full judgment. So wouldn't want to be them on that day. Thanks. Guess we shouldn't be too surprised at their skewed and warped perception of reality, though, given their true nature. So the solution to everything is withdrawing our consent and becoming aware of the tactics that are being used against us and not contracting with them in any way. There are many ways that you can do that. There are many commentators and speakers and researchers that can give you great ways of unplugging from the grid, so to speak, unplugging from the governmental system and becoming sovereign and becoming independent in so many aspects of your daily life. As we touched on earlier, voting. When we vote for these liars and thieves and criminals and child rapists, we are effectively consenting to a continuation of the system we've got. which is where we're being enslaved. Children are being sexually abused. All kinds of corruption and financial scandals are going on with public money, and the perpetrators are getting away with it and getting away with murder, literally, in so many cases, right under our noses. And when anyone goes to a voting booth and ticks one of those boxes to say, "I'll have more of this, please," you're just voting for one band or other of liars, thieves, criminals and child rapists, and you're effectively saying, "Yeah, I'm fine with this, I consent to another 4 or 5 years of this, please." So not voting is a great way of expressing the fact that you're not happy with any of this. And there are other ways of doing it as well. There have been calls for a general strike at the end of this month. The idea is that people just don't support the financial system that we have in any way for one day. And I think it is worth reflecting on what would happen if everyone in the country united and said, we're not going to use the banks at all on this day. There's going to be no credit generated from our financial transactions. We're not going to support the corporate materialist capitalist system by going out and making purchases on a certain day. If everybody withdrew their financial input to these corporate entities for just one day, it would send a very powerful message that we don't consent, we've had enough, we're not supporting this anymore. And it's all about understanding the ways in which this is done. When you discover how magicians or stage illusionists pull off one of their tricks, Darren Brown, for instance, David Blaine maybe, if somebody actually breaks down how this seemingly impossible illusion was done, and you realise that it was all sleight of hand, or it was done with mirrors, or it was done with autosuggestion, or whatever, the minute you see that trick or that illusion carried out on a TV show again, or a stage show, or whatever, it's not going to have that same effect on you, because it's out of the threshold of the subconscious mind, where symbolism lives, and it's into the realm of the conscious mind, where you're thinking rationally and logically about it, and you can remember that you've seen this before, that's how the trick was pulled off. It's not having that effect on you anymore. So imagine the effects of an entire nation or an entire human population that has got wise to the ways in which we're being tricked and deceived every day, and which has said, we're not going to give our consent to this anymore. You, the perpetrators, stand in full responsibility for what you're doing. You can take the consequences of it, because we're not approving it, and we don't agree with this in any way. That would create a very interesting state of affairs, I would suggest. So it is a choice in terms of our free will, and whether we choose a continuation of what we've got, or whether we choose ways of withdrawing our consent and our approval for it. And I've just included this, which is an excerpt from the book, Musical Truth, which is less music, more truth, really. The way it's turning out, it's 106,000 words into it now, and most of it has ended up being talking about natural law and how that all works, which is, as I say, a very different scenario to what I had expected when I set out to write it. But I've just put this in here because I probably wouldn't remember to put it this way, so I thought I'd just read this out. Understanding the concept of consent and free will approval, and the extent to which the powers that shouldn't be recognise they are bound by it, is where our true power lies. Without our approval, they would stand in full judgment for the crimes they commit against humanity. They know this. Their understanding of the fact that they will be taking on the full karmic consequence for actions which they alone choose would present a very different state of affairs to the one we currently have. This shift can only be achieved through vast numbers of people understanding deeply the methods that are being used against us. It's basically what I just said before, but in case I forgot to say it, there it is. This is a great quote from a wonderful passage from this guy, Matt Hancock, that runs a website called checktheevidence.com. And I'm finishing the last chapter of the book with this because he just puts everything so well. And I've just extracted one paragraph here. Authorised, controlled opposition misleaders are there to derail us, to interfere with our natural process of realising truth. They've chosen their path, but we're not obliged to give them any attention whatsoever. The individual mind is one of the greatest gifts imaginable. Therefore, one of the greatest crimes is to steal the ability of that mind to perceive reality. I've included this quote from Led Zeppelin's Stairway to Heaven, which you might think is an interesting song to get into if you see my previous talks on some of the backwards messages, the backmasking that's included in that particular track. And then you get into the fact that Jimmy Page was into all manner of dark occult and was a follower of Aleister Crowley and bought his house on Loch Ness and all the rest of it. But I've included it because I just think it's a great lyric. I also happen to like the song. I know there's dark aspects to it, but it's a great song. And this is a great lyric. Yes, there are two paths you can go by, but in the long run, there's still time to change the road you're on. It's all a choice. A lyric from John Lennon. People asking questions, lost in confusion. I tell them there's no problem, only solutions. There has to be, you know. I'm tired of documenting the ways in which we're being screwed and deceived and how fucked up the world is. We all know that now. There's enough information out there, and anyone that's been paying attention understands all this and understands the methods that are being used against us. It is time to find solutions. It's time to say we're not having it anymore, and it's time to get ourselves out of it. Nobody's going to do it for us. The choice is with us. So it's all about solutions. It's all about moving on. I don't want to hear about how screwed we are anymore, because they're not going to stop unless we make them stop or unless we remove ourselves from that situation. I normally put a few jokes in these, but I've not been able to work any in tonight. I'll get it right for the next talk. Just finishing up then, in my regular talk about the manipulations of the music business, I talk about the many ways in which the current glut of artists and tracks are being used to mind control the masses by way of symbolism, by way of hidden messages, by way of the sound frequencies and the production methods. But I always finish by reminding people that great, conscious, meaningful music by awakened artists still exists. Exactly, plug. Yeah. And it is out there if you know where to look for it. And I do this podcast every couple of weeks called The Sound of Freedom, where I bring together a whole bunch of conscious music. It's mainly hip-hop. There's a lot of reggae in there. There's some soul. There's some house stuff. There's a lot of old rock tracks. And I've got this feature called The Truth Trip, which is where I take it back to decades ago. It might be the 60s, 70s, 80s. And I take a bunch of tracks that were probably big hits at the time, but when you get into the lyrics that these artists were putting out there 30, 40 years ago, they apply absolutely to what's going on today and these times that we're living in. And so I put three of those together in this feature called The Truth Trip, because it's just incredible how much they apply. And for anyone that wants to get a fix of music that is designed to make you feel good, uplift you, and remind you that there's a whole world of artists out there that aren't owned by the corporations, that can still express themselves independently and artistically and say what's on their mind and sum up so much of what's on our minds in these times. You can get it from The Sound of Freedom. It's on SoundCloud, Podomatic, you can subscribe to it on iTunes, it's on Mixcloud. The easiest way to get it is just to go to my website, which is markdevlin.co.uk. There's a link there each fortnight. In addition to The Sound of Freedom, I do another podcast, which is called Good Vibrations. This is conversation-based. I get a whole bunch of researchers, authors, scholars, filmmakers, commentators on all manner of subjects concerned with truth, human consciousness, mind control, the occult, conspiracy, all kinds of alternative subjects. I'm up to 68 volumes now. And you can get the full set from SoundCloud again, or the easiest way to get it is via the regular site, markdevlin.co.uk. Hopefully, people will find some very stimulating conversations there. We get into all sorts of subjects, no holds barred, and no taboo subjects. And that all resides via markdevlin.co.uk. The book, Musical Truth, I'm aiming to get that out in the first quarter of next year. Still a lot of work to do on it. But I will be ploughing into it and attempting to get that out for first quarter 2016. Again, that will be announced on my site when it's ready. It's going to be a bit of a doorstop, something like that, I think. Quite a lot of words. And that is pretty much it. Thank you for your attention. I hope it all made sense. I think the second half went a bit better than the first, and many thanks.